Interesting that people who don't like the sequels love the prequels, and yet the prequels can be charged with many of the alleged crimes of the sequels. Let me start by just saying I have some real issues with some of the sequel trilogy choices, and that might be a video for another time when I'm feeling especially brave, but I don't love the sequels blindly. I enjoy them for what they are. It's more Star Wars. Do I take issue with the Rise of Skywalker's missed opportunities? Absolutely. But again, that's a video for another time. This discussion is about the fact that there is nothing new about hating the sequels. And I'll go as far as to say that in 10 years or so, they might be as beloved as the prequels. I can't believe I'm saying beloved as the prequels, because if you told me in 2005 that one day we'd look back on episode 1 through 3 with fondness and love, I would have told you to go kiss a Wookiee.
I can arrange that.
I was an OT kid. I was 7 when I saw Star Wars in the theaters. It wasn't even episode 4 or A New Hope yet. It was just Star Wars. And I also went through that very dark time where there was not a lot of Star Wars, and I was really into the Dark Empire comics, and I loved the Dark Force Rising trilogy. I survived that bleak and desolate time when being a Star Wars fan meant like finding things at garage sales and explaining to people that there is a difference between Star Trek and Star Wars. It seems like such a long time ago. And then when the prequels came out, I was disappointed. I've never shied away from that fact. I was so gravely disappointed in The Phantom Menace. Even seeing it in a theater full of A-list celebrities in New York City for the premiere was not enough to make me love that movie. It had racial stereotypes, it had childish jokes, it had a political agenda, and when episodes 2 and 3 came out, it ignored canon. It changed the stories we knew by adding force powers that were never seen before, or changing things that we heard in the original trilogy. Characters did things that were so out of character. I'm looking at you, flying R2D2, that it felt like the characters were changed. The whole thing felt like it ignored the stories that I loved. So here's my olive branch to the sequel antagonists. I understand you. I do. But as Tech said in The Bad Batch, understanding you does not mean I agree with you. Again, I have issues with the sequels. Hell, if I wanted to dig in on enough things, I could share problems with probably every single thing that Star Wars has ever released. But living in a world that's that sad and lonely is not something I want to do, right? So let's compare the criticisms of the trilogies, and I'll show you how the arguments are exactly the same. And if history does nothing else, it repeats itself.
It's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
One of the things I hear a lot is that there's no place for real world politics in Star Wars. Well, the prequels might disagree with you. In 2005, the Chicago Tribune ran an article with a headline that said, Star Wars inadvertently hits too close to US's role. And in it, it said, now the Star Wars series has wrapped up while George W. Bush's presidency is triggering questions about America's role in the world, its use of military might, and the tolerance of political dissent. It also says, to Lucas, the broader point is that politics, like the age-old myths that inform Star Wars, never really changes. And then when they asked George if George W. Bush was a Sith, he said with a laugh, I wouldn't say. So politics, real world or otherwise, has always been a part of Star Wars. Another argument that gets thrown around a lot is that the humor in The Last Jedi was childish. And you know what? It was.
About his mother.
Open fire!
And so was Jar Jar Binks, stepping in a pile of crap, making faces at animal farts, and bumbling anything he held in his hands. That's comic relief. And it's in the greatest stories that you know. And you might not always think it's funny. And it also may change based on how old you are. As a 30-year-old, fart jokes were not... Okay, fart jokes are always funny. But the stepping in poo was not as humorous as it was to an 8-year-old. The third argument is that the Disney films completely ignore the established canon. Well, the prequels and even, frankly, the original trilogy do that as much or more than the sequels. George ignored his own canon. Remember in 1980, we were told that Obi-Wan's master was Yoda?
The
Jedi Master who instructed me.
And in 1983, we were told that Leia remembered her mother. And honestly, the rule of two concept that was established in the prequels goes completely against what Vader and Palpatine planned when they were going to turn Luke to join them. Look, Darth was not even a title.
Only a master of evil, Darth.
It was his first name. All these things are contradicted in the prequels. Finally, let's talk about the Force.
That's not how the Force works.
Remember in the very first action scene from The Phantom Menace when Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon used the Force to dash away from the droidekas? That probably would have been pretty helpful in many situations we saw throughout Star Wars. But it's never been used again. Never. And let's face it, the original trilogy threw out telekinesis and Force lightning and Force ghosts with no explanation whatsoever. So the Force is changing all the time. What it can do and the lore behind it changes all the time. And while time heals all wounds, there can't be a discussion about the fondness that has developed for the prequels without addressing the 7 seasons of the Clone Wars animated series and what it did to add backstory and gravitas to episodes 2 and 3. The new Disney Plus lineup will do the same for the sequels. It will fill in that 30-year gap. It's going to answer all those head scratchers, and it will provide a fan connection to the sequels. And I dare say it's taking on a more challenging task by connecting all 3 trilogies in ways that the sequels probably failed. We're seeing prequel nods and sequel Easter eggs already in The Mandalorian, and there's only going to be more as we get into the stories of the New Republic. But this is going to take time. Also, ask any 8 to 12-year-old kid what their favorite Star Wars movie is, and they're probably going to say something like the ones with Rey in them. When they're older and they look back at the sequels as their Star Wars, part of that is going to be because of the surrounding content. Ask any millennial who loves the prequels about their favorite trilogy, and they're probably also going to reference the Clone Wars series as part of their evidence. My kids are going to say that they love the sequels, but they also loved Grogu and Fennec Shand and a whole host of characters that we haven't even met yet. It takes time to tell an epic story. It takes patience and a willingness to be uncomfortable with where the storytellers are taking us. Had I known then what I know now, I would not have been so depressed walking out of The Phantom Menace. And I would honestly love the ability to experience it again for the first time, knowing what I now know. One day, even those that hate the sequels may feel the same. They just have to remember that it's more Star Wars, more of something that they love. Thanks for listening to me ramble, and may the Force be with you.